Duty, honor, country. Three words that are almost always connected with the United States Military Academy at West Point. Its stunning campus along the Hudson is the backdrop for dramatic scenes in America's national story with legends like Grant, Eisenhower, Patton, and MacArthur, men intertwined with legend and legacy of a hallowed institution. So when West Point made the decision to admit women into its ranks, a firestorm of controversy and protest flared. What would the admission of women do to the great fraternity of soldiers and leaders? What would it mean to military training and readiness? What would happen to West Point's vaunted reputation as the premier training ground for America's elite warriors? Tonight on State of Independence, a woman who knows a lot about the topic because she lived it as a member of one of the first classes to admit women to West Point will be our guest. The author of the new book, West Point Woman, is here tonight on State of Independence, so you won't want to miss this conversation. Stay with us. In the not too distant past, West Point was a males only world, an environment of, by, and for the best of America's young men. Nominated by a member of Congress, becoming a West Point cadet has always been the stuff of every adventure-driven boy, until it wasn't. On October 7th, 1975, President Gerald Ford signed the law allowing women to be admitted to the military colleges. The next year, July 7th, 1976, 119 women made history by becoming the first females to join the Corps of Cadets at the United States Military Academy at West Point. Sara Potecha is the author of her own experience as a pioneer cadet, West Point Woman. Sara, we welcome you today to State of Independence, and we're so glad that you wrote this book. It's just so special. I've been to West Point, as I was telling you before the show. I've been there, and it's just an incredible place. I mean, the scenery is just incredible, and then the history at the place is incredible. What was it like for you to start there as a plebe, I guess you pronounce it? Your first year, you're in the fourth class of women to be admitted to West Point. Tell me what it was like.
Incredibly difficult. Nothing prepared me in life to be screamed and yelled at and have my neck braced and to have to memorize reams of information. I mean, there's just historically things that cadets have to know, and to go from being a total civilian into this really rigid environment that wasn't very welcoming to women, quite frankly. There were men that pledged to make it their job to get as many women to quit as possible. And I did have a couple run-ins with some of those men. So it was very challenging and humbling at the same time, because everybody that goes there is smart. Yeah. I mean, some really brilliant
So you did well
people.
in high school then?
Very well.
You went to what, Winchester High School?
Yes.
In Winchester, Massachusetts, right?
Yes.
And you were a top student there. So a member of Congress nominated you.
Yes.
And
at the time, Congressman Markey, now he's a senator.
Yes, so Ed Markey nominated you to get to and you were admitted into the academy.
Yes.
A very big moment, of course.
Right.
And celebrate. So everybody's watching, because it doesn't have, fourth class of women to be admitted.
Yes.
How many from Massachusetts? Women?
I was the only woman. I know there were a couple guys, you know.
So the only woman in the whole state to be admitted to the academy.
Right. As far as I know, I never saw another woman from Massachusetts.
How many women started with you?
My class had about 125, but we were the lowest graduation rate of any class, and it's improved over the time. But
how many graduated?
So about 59 of 125.
Wow.
Yeah, so we had the highest attrition rate, and for the first 10 years it was about 50%, whereas the men, it was about 25 to 30% are going to leave. Not everybody's going to make it through the place, but we were just so many of, you know, I had roommate after roommate after roommate leave. So it could be lonely, because you're fewer and fewer of you.
Wow. So tell our viewers, because they don't know how hard it is. I mean, most people say, well, it's like going to college, right? I mean, you just take your courses, you study, and you're okay. Right. West Point's not quite that way.
No, I mean, you're tested on so many levels, physically, and some of the things that we had to do physically. Women at that time weren't really socialized to do that. Now, fortunately, I grew up in a really competitive family. My mother was a physical educator, and I had 3 brothers. So, I did chin-up contests with them in the winter, So I was a long-distance runner, so I had that as a benefit. But I had never taken 40 pounds of bricks on my back and jumped into an 8-foot pool.
In your book, that was frightening.
Yeah.
And you were saying that some of the professors would actually let people take in some water before they saved them.
Yeah, I was part of the Department of Physical Education, kind of testing us. And I do have a classmate that she read my book. And so you think you're just going through it until you write your book. And then she said, "Oh my gosh, Sarah, they did have to revive me." And then because you can't even be late to class, she had to be revived and then run to class. And she was a brainiac, so she was going to advanced calculus. And she said, and then I got hazed at the end of the day because she was on the swim team.
Wow.
So she almost drowned, and she was on the swim team.
Tell the viewers now. So here it is. She almost drowned. She was on the swim team as it was. She nearly drowns because she got 40 pounds of bricks on her back,
Right.
and she's wearing full military fatigues and boots and the like. So it's like
doing the bob and travel, 50-meter indoor pool. It was really, really tough. But I think also it was tough academically. I mean, when we attended, they have a lot more choices, but it's an engineering school.
Yeah.
And you had very little choice on what you couldn't really major. They called it a concentration, so a couple classes. And so, I wasn't naturally bent toward thermodynamics and electrical engineering, and yet here I'm taking these classes that you just have to work really hard at. And so you take all these military science classes in addition to military art and law and things that, and some people were just good at everything. They're incredibly bright. And I had a classmate, she's an orthopedic surgeon now, and she had a photographic memory. So it's not like I was going to have to really study. She was going to just get it the first time.
Right. But then there's a physical component to going to West Point. And so you're not just competing against other women, you're competing against guys who play football.
Yes.
People who are 6'2" and 3" and 200 pounds. Mm-hmm. And you're expected to do, and in some cases they might be hazing you, right?
Right.
And so tell, I was reading the part about how you have to kind of stand with your back arched and they're in your face and they're yelling at you, trying to break you.
Right.
I mean, what's the worst part of hazing?
I think it's because you feel so out of control that you can't say anything. And in one way, they're teaching you personal responsibility because you only had 4 answers, and it could be yes, sir, or ma'am. Yes, sir, no, sir. Sir, I do not understand. Or sir, can I ask a question? And they never wanted you to ask a question. So basically you had 2 answers, yes, sir, or no, sir. Yeah. So pretty soon you're accepting that, okay, I'm responsible for my uniform not being together, or I can't pull back the rifle correctly. So you take personal responsibility. So it was part of the process of developing you to be able to accept more and more feedback, because you got feedback, whether it's academic, on your military performance, on your leadership, your physical. So feedback. And it could feel like a place where it's easy to fail. And how do you pick yourself up and keep going even though you're not doing as well as you'd like to? And so part of what I wanted to encourage in this book is to tell a series of stories that teach leadership lessons when you're in a cauldron of an experience. So my idea is everybody's going to learn great leadership at West Point. I mean, it's known for leadership, but I think women had the opportunity to learn some leadership lessons at a deeper level.
Wow. Well, it's kind of like being in the fiery furnace, in the Old Testament, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I mean, it's a really, you had to have felt alone. You were saying, like when they did the inspection for your room, that you wanted your room to be perfect because if you passed, then you would have more privileges, and one would be to be able to call home, I think, for 10 minutes or something.
Yes. If you got through the line, because they were also checking your uniform at the time. Of course, this is in cadet basic training, affectionately known as Beast Barracks, and so that didn't continue in the academic year, but that was tremendous because you just want to talk to your parents in the worst way. Yeah. And a couple times I didn't get the opportunity because they went through the room, found something, and then they finally let us go, and you're standing in line, and they said, "Oh, it's over. You don't get a chance," so you didn't get to call home.
Well, but I loved in the book how you talked about what it created in you, how it helped create character in you, and also even humor.
Yes.
You have a couple of humorous instances in the book where things happened that were pretty funny, and and you talk about that too, which is I think just amazing. So you finish Winchester High School, you get nominated for the Academy, you attend the Academy, you start there as a plebe, and it's hard. Are you a Christian person? Now you're the daughter of a minister.
Yes.
So you're a PK, a preacher's
kid. Yes. And so my parents laid a great foundation, but to me, church was about duty, because when you're a preacher's kid, you're there every time, and doors open. And although I thought I had a moral compass, and I certainly did, and that's one thing that attracted me to West Point, the idea of having, an honor code and such. But I'm pretty miserable there. And so we had one professor, my psychology professor, and at the time he was Major Forsythe. And I thought, oh, this guy actually calls us by our first name. Maybe he'll help me get my handle around all this stress here and help me out. And I went in to see him, and one of the first questions he said, Sara, what's your spiritual life like? And I was floored. And I was like, well, I pray every day, kind of thing, like I can get through this place. And then he said, do you think I could share with you more about the Christian faith? And he kind of laid out for me the idea that I guess that was a time of readiness for me, that if Christ just died for me alone, he would have come to earth to do that. And so it became a personal faith, and I accepted Christ that evening, talking with Major Forsythe. And I remember going back to my barracks. I mean, nothing changed. I was still struggling in my grades. I was still struggling with a squad leader that could not stand women and made my life miserable. And the bells in the cadet chapel were playing, which never played except on Sunday afternoons or maybe Saturday afternoons before a football game. And in my heart, I just knew that the angels were rejoicing, that my name was written in the book of life. And I didn't even necessarily know that scripture, but I knew in my heart at that moment. And so my life was totally different from that, because I had deeper hope, deeper understanding of my faith, and that I was never alone in this place. I was never going to be alone.
What a wonderful thing to know that God is with you.
Right.
That even in your trial and in your difficulty, that he's right there with you to give you that comfort and that peace, the peace that passes all understanding.
Amen.
What a blessing. Well, that didn't make life any easier necessarily.
No, and nothing changed. I didn't, you go there because you're in college thinking I'd really like to date somebody, but they're so against us. And
do they allow you to date? Only
your classmates when you're a fourth classman or plebe, and then you can date people that are not in your chain of command afterwards, And so I remember thinking I still don't have a boyfriend, or a good boyfriend, but eventually I did meet my first husband.
Wow.
Yeah, and so at West Point, and so there I tell a little bit about you could still find love in this place, because the guys would say, the women came here to find a husband, and I'd be thinking in camouflage and the stuff that we had to do, there's a lot easier ways, and yet it was really neat how I met Eddie, and then we ended up getting married right after graduation, so
wow.
It was a really...
Did you get married at West Point?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Protestant chapel, right there.
Wow.
Yeah.
And children?
Yes, we have 3 daughters, and they are now all grown, and 2 of them are married, and my youngest isn't yet, but 3 daughters.
Very nice, very, very nice.
Yes.
Well, that's very exciting.
Right.
Very, very exciting. What a blessed life you've had. What have your kids learned from your experience? I mean, your book really points toward character. You say that
right.
that character is, this is how character is created and how leadership is learned. And have your kids learned from your experience, from your walk, from your challenges?
I really believe they have, and part of my story is my first husband passed away very suddenly when he was just 36, and my daughters were 9 and 7.5, and I was pregnant with Joy. And I used to wonder sometimes why I went to the academy. I did not make the military career, but I knew after I lost him that that discipline of getting up every day and doing something was what got me through those very difficult first days after losing him. I can remember giving myself orders. You know, you got to go to the funeral home. I mean, in the same week I was picking out colors for the baby's room, I'm picking out a casket. And I think the only way you kind of manage that was by giving myself orders. And I said, that's why God had me at West Point, to prepare me for this long road of being widowed. And I think, and I've always said it, and I say in my book, the biggest leadership challenge I had was being a single mom then for many years until I met my second husband, Potecha. And, but that idea of my kids seeing me get up every day and go to work and create a life for them, I think that they've all really, truly learned to appreciate that. And keep your faith. I mean, my faith was incredibly the cornerstone of keeping me positive, keeping me seeing the future is always a possibility, and just the ability to continue on knowing that God causes all things to work together for good for those that know Him and are called according to His purposes. And I clung to Romans 8:28 day after day during those difficult, the walk of a widow. And from that, I've been able to help many widows, and I think my children have seen, you know, she overcame, you know, continued to overcome, even though it wasn't always easy for her.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. What was the hardest part for you?
Of being widowed?
Yeah.
I would say doing the same things without him, like going to church, and you'd see all your friends with their spouses putting their arm around their wife like he used to do to me, and I was there alone. And I think having any major, like their graduations, the weddings without their dad, it's a reminder that he isn't there, but we do know where he is. And all the children, all my girls know that their father is in heaven and they will see him again, which gives us that eternal hope, right? And I think that probably was the hardest. I mean, those first times going to church alone or going out to eat and realizing I got to do it all.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. But God did bless you to meet another man.
Yes.
And
yes.
to find love again.
Yes.
And to have a life that's happy and fulfilled.
And more so, I think Reed was the exact right person for my daughters, who basically had, like particularly Joy, had no father figure up until that point in her life. And for him to come in, I tell him he's very high in emotional intelligence, since I teach on that, and he could easily move into our family and become that father figure, you know, and it's been a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah, it's beautiful. What do you say in your book are the key elements to create character, the key things? Because, you know, character is something that is seen when the chips are down.
Right.
Who you really are and what you're made of is seen not when times are good and everything's going your way, but it's when you're having a hard time, when the chips are down, when the going is rough. You know, that's when the world gets to see who you really are, what you're made of.
Right.
You know, kind of like your experience at West Point. You know, I mean, you're doing great in high school. You're a star. You get nominated by a member of Congress. You go to the academy, and from the standpoint of people that don't know what your experience is like, they say, "Wow, that Sarah's really something special." But then Sarah gets to the academy, and it's really hard.
Right.
And then the world gets to see what you're really made of. Right. And in your case, because you followed Christ, I mean, you came to Christ, and Christ in you produced all this wonderful stuff, all these wonderful attributes that have made you who you are, and that positioned you to be the woman that you are, and to be able to handle everything that came your way, including love and death. And love again, and motherhood, all these things, and a career. So God was able to do a marvelous, as He continues to, marvelous work in you and through you.
Yes. So I think one of the things, being widowed at a young age, that I kept going back to was some of the things that we would pray in the cadet prayer. That was to do the harder right instead of the easier wrong. And when you're faced with overwhelming challenge, raising 3 daughters by myself, holding down a job and doing everything that, 2 people are supposed to do, 1 person is doing. And I think choosing to do what the next best thing is to do. Today I have to, go to work, or after I lost a job, I have to make a plan to get another job. And to keep doing those kind of things, I think, was all taught to me at really a young age. Yeah. And formulated in the cauldron of the West Point experience. And so to apply that, choose to do the harder right instead of the easier wrong, is something that I've kind of lived through, and I believe taught to my children.
Well, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, when we come back, I'll ask Sara about her assessment of today's leaders, not specific people, but the state of leadership in general. What kind of leaders should we be looking for on the horizon at this moment in our history? Stay with us.
You're watching Joe Watkins' State of Independence on Lighthouse TV. Positively different. Share your comments about today's program in the comment box at joewatkins.org.
We're with the author of West Point Woman, Sara Potecha, a member of one of the first classes of female cadets. Sara, it is so good having you here. So tell us, West Point trains people, men and women now, to be leaders and to lead us in times of war. So that's important stuff. I mean, no matter who you are, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, at the end of the day, you want the best people leading us in time of war so that we win. Thank God we had General Eisenhower and some other great, well-educated, well-trained people leading us during the Second World War so that we won. Mm-hmm. So tell me, you're a Christian person.
Yes.
What does West Point and your experience as a Christian person in the military tell you about leadership?
Well, I think one of the things that I think even some of the more difficult things that the Academy taught me is humility and being humble. And I have a whole chapter that I talk about the importance of a leader being real, being authentic, not putting on airs. As we were taught, officers eat last. That whole genre and that idea, that's something that I think is missing sometimes in some of the leaders that we see, but the best leaders, the ones that we remember and we want to emulate, were humble leaders. I remember we had a lot of dignitaries come and speak at the Academy, but the one, and usually as a cadet, you're like, oh great, I gotta go listen to somebody, I don't even know who they are, and I really need to be studying because I have a term end or an exam coming up. And one gentleman came and he started, and he was kind of rotund and not very tall, and he says, I'm not a West Point grad, I'm not airborne, I'm not even a ranger, and he said, I'm just an overall failure, and yet he was a general. And it's interesting that I remember him far more than some of the ones that would kind of pontificate at us, and he was just comfortable in his own skin. And I think that's authenticity, because that's what allows you to connect with others. And that's why I'm a big advocate of teaching emotional intelligence and teaching people to connect at a deeper level with the people that they're trying to influence by communicating and connecting, not just talking at.
Is there a place
listening.
for honor in all this?
Absolutely, to have integrity. What I say is what I do, and I'm not going to be ambiguous in what I do, what I say.
Didn't you have a chain that you were wearing earlier, something that said honor on it?
Yes, it does. This is a necklace that I had designed with the help of Frida Rothman, who's an international jeweler, and it's really to honor military women. And a little bit of the story behind it, I was drawn to her beautiful jewelry at a jewelry store because the chain reminded me of the chain around Trophy Point. And as a 4th classman, I would look across the Hudson River and go, maybe I could swim that far and get out of here. So it has a double meaning. It's a very picturesque place, but it also was a very strenuous place. And so I approached her, and she's designed this beautiful jewelry. I have like an honor bracelet on that also is honoring military women, who often are not kind of talked about in the beauty industry and fashion, and she wanted to make that difference.
Yeah, well, people think that women that go into the military are of a certain type, but that's probably not so. I mean, how many members were there in your class?
How many women?
Yeah.
Well, for every one guy, for every 10 guys, there's one woman, so we made up just 10% of the Corps, and then only about 58 of us graduated in the class of 83, starting with 125.
But probably all very different as well.
Yes, very different, different politically now, and I might be one of the minorities being more conservative, certainly a conservative evangelical Christian, but there is some of us that would categorize that, and then others that would be a lot more on the feminist side. I guess I embraced my femininity because I see it as a strength. I don't see it as a limitation. And I think, I used to say, when you have to do everything the guys do, it is so nice to be treated like a woman. I appreciated when the doors were opened, because you're carrying books and no one opened the doors for you, and you did all this kind of stuff. So I appreciated being feminine. So.
Well, there's something to be said for that. The wonderful thing about you is that as a believer, you've always demonstrated that you have love in your heart for everybody. And even though everybody's different, you manage to love people who are very unlike you, which is a wonderful thing. And it really shows the heart of Christ. And I think that's wonderful and amazing. You don't see that in a lot of, you don't see that, you don't think of that when you think of people who have that outstanding West Point military training. It doesn't come to mind right away that somebody might also have the love of Christ in their heart, and they might love their neighbor like they love themselves. Certainly, of course, if you're a soldier, or if you're leading soldiers, and you're willing to put your life on the line for them and for all of us at home, clearly you love your neighbor like you love yourself, because you're willing to put your life on the line for the rest of us, which is a blessing. What would you say to somebody young, a young person who sees you and says, "Boy, Sara is amazing. She had an outstanding high school career, and she got nominated for the academy and went there and actually graduated, has had a great career, mother, wife, everything. And now she's an author of a book. She's written this great book, West Point Woman. This is so somebody who wants to be like you, what would you say to them, to a young woman who's 17 or 18 years old, or maybe younger, who wants to go to the academy? What should they be doing now?
Well, it takes about 2 years to go through the process. There's a lot of tests you have to pass. Of course, you have to get that congressional nomination, and they have boards. You might have to go in for an interview. But to make yourself comfortable with the idea of going to the academy, I say go visit. There are summer programs you can do. My daughter, because I lived in Virginia at the time, she actually did the swimming camp at the Naval Academy. It was a lot closer. And, turned her mind off from going. But people that I've worked with for 2 years to get them into the academy, they'll go, they'll have the experience, they decide if it's for them. Some will visit and they'll stay in a plebes room, a fourth classman, and they get the whole experience.
What are those rooms like?
Very barren, Spartan, as you would predict, tightly made beds, and, not a lot of radios or anything until you're upperclassmen, and everything's dress and your
Should they be practicing how to make a bed? Because you have inspections still, I'm guessing.
They still do. Yeah, I think every Saturday we called them Sammy, Saturday AM inspection, Sammys. Yeah, I'm sure they still do those things, because it wouldn't be West Point without it. But to go and attend and see if you get that same sense I did, that this is a place that's not just about getting a great education, it's about serving your country, and the honor code and the camaraderie you learn while you're there. So I would encourage them to do that as a first step.
Outstanding, so thoughtful. Special thanks to our guest author, Sara Potecha. Her book, West Point Woman, is available now on Amazon. Well, that's all the time we have for this week's program. I think you'll agree our neighborhoods, our states, and our country need leaders with that special combination of moral clarity and character that Sara exemplifies. I'm so glad she wrote her wonderful book about her life and the leadership lessons she's learned along the way. This program, State of Independence, is here to equip you to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and your neighbor as you love yourself. Remember, you can view past episodes in our YouTube channel, and if you have a minute, drop me a message in the comment box at joewatkins.org. I would love to hear from you. and I read every one of your letters and I respond to them all. From America's first capital, Philadelphia, I'm Joe Watkins. God willing, I'll see you next week.
Joe Watkins' State of Independence is a production of Lighthouse TV, positively different. Made possible in part because of the support of viewers like you.